Hi, welcome back. The stave shell has been glued up right overnight. Just get a little close up here. It looks pretty good. All the seams seem all right. I measured it, which I should have done even before I glued it up, and there's ample diameter here for my target shell size, which is 13 7/8 inches. So now it's time to remove the clamps, remove the tape, and do some other things. So that's what I'm going to do.
And by some other things, what I mean is that I will prepare the rough drum for the external milling operation, whereby the 20-sided shape will become a cylinder.
Most of the tape is off. I just didn't want to deprive you of the experience of seeing the painter's tape from the Stave drum shell. So there we go. All set. There's still little scraps of tape on here, which I'll scrape off. But I think it really looks good. There's some rough spots where I didn't totally mill down the shell when I cut it to dimensions, to dimensional lumber. But that's okay, because when we mill the outside, it's all gonna get smooth. There's some interesting knots and things here. Definitely some interesting grain. I think it's gonna be a pretty nice drum. I'll probably keep this one for myself since it has some sort of sentimental value, I guess. It came from a tree on my property that it took out power in a storm. I mentioned that earlier, and it was freezing cold for 3 days while we slept in front of the fireplace because of what this tree branch did to us in the storm. Anyway, that's the initial rough shell, and from here on, after I do the scraping, it'll be in preparation to bring it down to its final dimensions. Okay, what is next here for our Stave drum shell?
I'm going to tell you what's next. I need to make sure that the outside of my rough drum sits 90 degrees to the mostly flat benchtop surface when resting on either end. Either end. On one end or the other. End. I use a square to check this, and I point out some unevenness at a few of the glued joints. I must have thought that I was auditioning for a reality show, because I babble at length during all of this. I will sum it up for you. There are two ways I use to even out the ends of the drum. First way is to use a router with a straight bit installed on a special jig that results in the drum end becoming exactly parallel to the work surface. Second way is to use a sandpapered surface to sand away the unevenness. The router method is great when the glued stave joints are very uneven. It corrects the problem very quickly. The sandpaper method is nice when joints are pretty close, so you only need to remove a little bit of material. Wood. The material is wood. I chose the latter method, so let's see that in action.
So the concept is you just kind of start turning it and sort of monitor the joints that you want to correct. And so that's what I'm going to do here, and my bottom's right here, so I'll try to put enough pressure on that. Okay, let's talk about how this jig works. First,
over the course of the next several clips, I'm going to be mounting the rough drum shell to these MDF discs, which allow it to ride on the router sled that you see in the picture. This router sled is for milling the outer shell of the drum to get the outer circumference and to achieve that 13 7/8 inch diameter drum shell. Of course, first I measure to try to align the MDF discs to the center or approximate center of the rough drum shell, and then I move on to gluing the MDF discs to the drum shell and finally inserting the threaded rod. So we'll see all of that coming up right here.
So the drum with its forms is mounted to the rod. We've got nuts holding it tight on both sides, so it shouldn't be going anywhere once I start turning it. I've got this rod threaded to its mount on this. I never change this one. At least I don't when I'm making 14-inch drums. So that's going to be at the right height. This other piece of the sled, the other mount, I've taken off because now I have to get that into position. Okay, rail's a little tight, they need to be adjusted. But here's what happens. Turn the rod around. Start turning the shell.
I get a little confused trying to explain the setup here. What happens after I turn on the router is I turn the drum, which, since it is mounted on a threaded rod held by mounts on either end, advances from right to left as the router bit cuts the outer arc of the shell. Because the router bit is set at a fixed height, and because the drum turns around a fixed axis, which is parallel to the top of the router bit, the odd-shaped drum gradually becomes cylindrical.
Here I have the drum shell mounted and approximately centered between the two sides of the sled, and I've already measured, but just to show you what I was talking about here.
I measure the height of the threaded rod from the top of the router table on both sides of the mounted drum. This is to ensure that the drum will traverse horizontally across the router bit, resulting in an even cut. The video's lousy here, but the measurements were within a 1/16 of an inch of each other, so I'm good to go. And this is just a quick look at the dust collection that I had set up for this part of the process. I have this hood connected to some flexible hose, which goes to PVC mounted on my wall that goes back to a shop vac in the back of the garage. It's simple, but somewhat effective.
Hey, one last thing before I start. I just wanted to show the position of the router bit. As you can see, hopefully it is positioned not too high. It's just gonna basically start to nick off the corners of the shell as I turn it. And so probably won't be fully round on the first pass, and we'll bring it back and we'll raise the router bit and send it through again. So start it up. Give a close-up of what's going on here, so you can see that the joints are getting flattened over, and so this part is rounded but the router is not cutting deep enough to get all the flat spots. That's okay, since it's just our final pass. What's good here, is that it seems to be cutting pretty evenly around the whole shell, which is what I wanted, obviously. Even if it was a little bit lopsided, just, you know, the whole geometry of the thing, turning a cylinder to, you know, be cut at one point of reference, that should make a perfect circle. Regardless, it just might make the shell thickness vary over the circumference of the shell. So, so far so good. And there you have the first pass done. Let's see. It's hard to make out, but there's definitely flat spots here. You know, like I said before, it wasn't meant to become all the way around on the first pass. But boy, I think it's looking really good. And I'm real happy still with this, how it's going. And all from wood that I sort of harvested from my own property. Now I'm raising the router bit. I want to bring it up probably just a 16th. Right now I think I'm going to need to go more than that to finish this thing, but a 16th is 1/2 spin of this adjustment wheel. So I guess that's like 4 past E. 16 point. This is not easy to do. Okay, I think about right there. Close enough. If we look here, yeah, we can see that we're definitely above the level where it's at now. Still well below the MDF form. So. For a closer look, we are round now. It is, router is coming in contact throughout the full circumference, and it seems to be very even, which I'm thrilled with. It means I've got it mounted correctly. And I'll continue on, though I don't think I'm going to video the whole depth of the shell this time. I'll show you when it's done. The shell is now cylinder. It's completely round. I put it through its second pass. The measurement I'm going for the circumference is 110.7 centimeters, and where I'm at now is right at 112. So I've got at least one more pass to go here. I need to get it down 1.3 centimeters to that magic 110.7 mark. Of course, if the tape lined up correctly, I'll double check this. But I've got a bunch of calculations that will tell me how much to raise the router bit in order to take off the amount of circumference that I need to take off to get it down to that 110.7. So I'll be doing one more pass, and that'll be it for the outside. Just have to sand it up then. That should be pretty close. The last measurement took me right down to the form, the MDF form, pretty close anyway, not completely flush, but I know the MDF form was a little bit smaller than the target diameter anyway, so I think I'm going to be good. I'll measure it again, and if I need to take off just a hair more, I will. But I also have to sand anyway, so if it's a little large, then I'll just be happy with the way it is, and I'll leave it up to sanding to get it to the final diameter, circumference, whatever you want to call it.
My final pass on the router table took me to 1/32 of an inch of my target diameter, which again is 13 7/8 inches. So at this point I was ready to sand. So the random orbit sander does a pretty good job of getting out these deep tracks. I don't have the newest disc on there, so it's taken some time. I should probably put a fresh sanding disc on. But you can see where the router bit left these tracks. Let's see if there's anywhere where I haven't got them cleaned up yet. That's a little bit, maybe not so much. Yeah, this is going to take a while. But like I said, I'll move down in grits. I have another finish sander that I switch to when I get to the higher grit papers, but I just try to sand, of course, with the grain, standard sanding practice. It's tempting to just spin the drum and sand in opposite the grain direction, but I think sanding with the grain is always a better idea. That's it for now. The outer shell is done. Next time we'll show you how the inner milling is done. Thanks for watching. Please hit like and subscribe.